This episode is brought to you by Blueprint Health. Blueprint Health is a measurement-based care platform for mental health providers. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth. And also this episode is brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice. They're who I use in my practice. Check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Hello, I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, where we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello everyone, I'm Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 228 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so glad you've joined me and glad you're with me on this journey. It's hard to believe we're into May already, and spring is in full force here in East Tennessee where I'm located, and the pollen is about to kill me. So if I sound a little scratchy today, that's why, because it's thick in the air, and I had to go get my other allergy shots today just to kind of give me a little bit of a boost. But I'm really excited for you to hear from my guest today. Kasey Compton, who is no stranger to this podcast, joins me again, and I'm looking forward to you hearing more of her backstory, and particularly around how she put together her book, Fix This Next, and Fix This Next in Healthcare, the more I get to know Kasey and the more I get to interact with her, the more appreciative I am of her and what she is doing, not only in our professions, but just who she is as a person. So kudos to Kasey. And Kasey is she's an incredibly brave person and also a very kind person. And I think you'll hear that in her stories, and particularly her sharing some of her backstory. One of the things that I think Kasey is really coming into her own with is her ability to tell stories. And when you hear from her today, I think you'll pick up on that. And I'm just really excited for Kasey to be on the podcast again. The other thing too that I wanted to share with you is that I've recently come off of coming away from a conference that I was taking part in and got to present at, and that was, you probably heard me mention it on previous episodes, and that was the Faith and Practice conference that my good friend Whitney Owens put together and helped carry off splendidly, by the way. And it was down in Jekyll Island, Georgia, and really enjoyed getting to connect with some people and being able to, again, just connect in person. I think we've all been in just kind of the dregs of COVID and all that has created for us. And it's just so nice to be able to reconnect with people and get back on track with doing some in-person conferences. So anyway, you're going to be hearing more from my good friend Whitney Owens. She is just doing some incredible things with just what she's doing and teaching therapists how to have faith-based practices. So more to come from Whitney, I'm sure, here in the future. You know, this year has just been a great year so far, and on just a lot of fronts. The other thing I want to make you aware of, if you've not heard about it already, I've got another podcast that I started at the beginning of this year called the Kindness and Compassion podcast. And I'm getting it out there slowly but surely, but we're up to 10 episodes now. I'm going to be doing some sprints here with getting some more episodes out, but a lot of great people on that podcast. This past episode, my good friend Uriah Guilford, who again, you've heard on this podcast, also Jane Carter, who you've heard on this podcast, joined me in that podcast, and us just talking about kindness and compassion and how we can implement that in the world and in our lives more. And so it moves away from just kind of the business side of doing therapy, but is really a podcast geared towards most anybody, not necessarily to therapists. So I want to commend that to you. And if you'll just go to kindnessandcompassion.com and check it out, love for you to hear that podcast and the work I'm doing there. And also, if you'd like to be a part of that project with me, reach out to me. You can reach me at Gordon@practiceoftherapy.com, or you can reach me at Gordon@kindnessandcompassion.com. So, again, I just want to commend that to you and say, take a listen and be sure to not only subscribe or follow this podcast, but also that one, because I'm really excited about it and pretty proud of the work that I'm trying to do with that on just giving voice to how we can be kinder and more compassionate in our lives. And also, before we get to my conversation with Kasey, I'd love for you to check out the free webinars that I've got available. One of the things that I've kind of pivoted with here with the practice of therapy this year is I'm looking at other ways to get free content out to people, and just feedback that I'm getting from people. Free webinars seem to be a way to put stuff out there so that I kind of put my teaching hat on in different ways. But if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars, you can find out about what we've got out there so far. And I've got several other planned for later in the year. And so they'll all be housed at that particular landing page, practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. Right now, I've got one on Google Workspace. If you're curious about using Google Workspace in your practice, also a webinar on moving from solo to group practice. It's called Scaling Without Failing. I've teamed up with my good friend, Dr. David Hall, on that one. And then also another webinar that I've put out there on accepting insurance in your practice. I think a lot is changing on that front within our industry or within our profession, where accepting insurance is maybe a little more attractive than it once used to be. So anyway, you can check that out. All of those you can find at practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. And I will mention again that these are automated webinars, so you get to pick the time at which you take part in the webinar. So you pick your time and sign up, and then you get to watch it. So be sure and check those things out. So that was a lot here at the introduction. And before we get to my conversation with my dear friend Kasey Compton, I'd love for you to hear from our sponsors, TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, and also Blueprint Health.
As your practice grows, the systems and processes you have in place will keep your practice running smoothly. That is why it is important to have an electronic health record system that is specific to mental health providers. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. They are who Gordon uses in his practice. And did I mention that they are one of the top-rated EHRs for mental health private practices? Their support is also second to none. Be sure to check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free. Running a great behavioral health practice is hard. Payers are demanding more measurable outcomes, therapists are harder than ever to hire and retain, and clients expect a digitally enabled care experience. Introducing Blueprint, the all-in-one measurement-based care platform that helps behavioral health providers grow top-line practice revenue, increase clinician satisfaction, and deliver more effective care. Blueprint's intuitive platform administers, scores, and charts hundreds of symptom rating scales to give clinicians deeper insights into how clients are progressing. And you may be eligible to earn additional reimbursement for each administered outcome measure. Get your first month of Blueprint free by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth.
hello, folks, and welcome again to the podcast. And I am so thrilled to have back with me my dear friend, Kasey Compton. Welcome, Kasey.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Yes. And Kasey, if you don't know about Kasey Compton in your private practice, you need to know about Kasey Compton because she is, in my mind, a rock star as far as this whole space and profession and what she's been able to do to teach folks about being in practice. So Kasey, as I start with most every episode, and this is like the third or fourth time Kasey has been on the podcast. I'm losing count, and she will be back again, I know. But Kasey, tell folks more about you and where you're located and how you've landed where you've landed.
Sure. I think that your podcast was the first podcast, I believe, that I was ever on. And that was back in 2017. So,
wow.
Yeah, it feels like a long time, but it also feels like it was just yesterday too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm in South Central Kentucky, small lake town here in Somerset. And I started in the private practice world in 2015. I was a clinician since 2009, went into college or graduate school knowing that I wanted to own a business and that, this was going to be in the cards for me. I just didn't really know it was going to be like this. So started in 2015 and really had no experience at all and didn't have any money and didn't have any formal training and just spent a lot of time building the practice and the bootstrapping mentality because that's all I knew. And if you're from the South, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are, that's kind of how we're taught to be proud of that. Like it's, we're not taught to outsource and do all these things. Like we're taught to just get in there and get your hands dirty and do it yourself. And so that's what I did and spent the next few years just taking my business, and every year it would double in size and revenue. And, I just thought that's what everybody was doing. And I had no idea. Yeah. Had a couple people approach me and just say, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And so I've spent the last several years sharing different types of systems related concepts and strategies to help business owners grow their business, but not compromise their lifestyle or their peace of mind.
Yeah. And I know that in the several years that I've known Kasey now, really her superpower is in creating systems and processes. And I know this past year, she came out with one of the best books that I can recommend for anybody in private practice. And that's Fix This Next in Healthcare. And so Kasey, you want to talk a little bit more about that because that's a big part of your story.
It is. So since I was a little girl, I remember being 9 years old, living in Grand Central Apartments in this, I don't know, it was government related housing at the time, funding or subsidiaries. I don't know. I was 9. But it was this apartment complex and it had all these kids in the complex. And my grandpa, you'll read about him in the book. I call him Poppy. My Poppy built me a bookshelf, and I remember he painted it pink. It was like this really light pink. And it was full of books. And so I decided that I was going to create this library for all the kids in the apartment complex. And so I made I got those little pockets that go inside, and I glued them on, and anyone who wanted to check out a book, I made them write their name down. And I just remember all the way back at 9 years old thinking, I want to write books. I want to do, this is what I want to do. I love to read. My mom said I was reading when I was 2 and 3. And I think now as I've had a lot more time and space to move past that point, I think that was my escape were books. And so it was always a dream of mine, but I told myself, well, what in the heck am I going to write about? I mean, I didn't want to write fiction. And I hadn't really done anything that I thought was worthy of writing about. And then you read some of these amazing authors like Mike Michalowicz and Malcolm Gladwell and, Brene Brown and all these people. And then you get intimidated and you're like, well, I can't do that. I don't have anything special or unique to say. So for a long time, I just talked myself out of it and told myself that it wasn't the right time. And when I read, I'd been following Michalowicz's work for a while, and I resonated with his style of writing. And whenever I read Fix This Next, I thought, well, I had told myself this for a while. Like, you read these books and you're like, well, I've been doing that already in some form or fashion. And so as I was telling myself those things, and then I read Fix This Next, and I was like, I'm pretty much already doing this already, especially after I read Clockwork and I read Fix This Next. And I thought, he's put it together in a framework that's easy to understand. And he built it off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I just thought, well, that's exactly what we're doing. Like, we teach clients this every day. This is how we treat our clients and our patients. And so it just felt like that if I was going to write a book, I wanted to do it with some support of someone that I respected and trusted. And two, it was such an important message and such an important need for healthcare providers. And so I decided to write a derivative of his book, Fix This Next, specifically for people in the healthcare industry. And so that's how it came about. And what it did that I was not expecting, it just cracked it wide open for me. And, you hear people talking about, if you're listening to podcasts about authorship, or if you're listening to authors talk about their books, sometimes they'll talk about finding their voice. And it wasn't actually until I wrote the entire book and I was at the very last chapter, and it's a chapter about my grandma Lily and her blue ribbon quilts that she used to sew. And I wrote that chapter. I turned it into AJ Harper, who helped me developmentally edit the book. And she read it and she was crying. And I just had never seen her cry at that point. And she was like, okay, I have some good news and I have some bad news. I was like, okay, tell me. And so she said, you found your voice. This is you. This is the fanny flag of business, is what she called it. She said, but the bad news is you got to go back and put that in the whole entire book because it ain't in there.
Yeah.
So then I had to go back and fanny flag it up, or she calls it now, paw it up. But it cracked it open for me, and it made me even more passionate about helping other people with books, even more than what I was already trying to do through consulting.
Yes. And one of the things about it, Kasey, and I can, the way I read now is through Audible, and just knowing you and listening to you read the book on Audible just really it was very touching. And it's just your ability to tell story and pull things together is talking about before we started recording is I just know in your work as a consultant, and I'm seeing it too in my work as a consultant, seeing people feeling really overwhelmed with trying to do business in a certain way, or they think that they've got to get it just right.
but they don't. I think one of the things, again, and this ties into finding your voice, I think finding your sea legs in business is something that people have to really work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed it as I was writing Fix This Next, and we did a lot of case studies and a lot of research, and there's actual stories of my clients in the book that we saw. It's so obvious. And then after writing the book, I've seen it even more, and that's one of the reasons. Thank you for saying that I'm a good storyteller. That does not feel natural. It did not feel natural to me. It feels more natural now. But all of those things were part of the reason why I started writing the book I'm writing now. And it's all story. It's all in story. But it's just, and it's about how to find joy, how to find more joy in your accomplishments. Because what I've seen is, so often we just put our head down and we just bust it out. We're like working our tails off, and we wake up one day and we're tired. And then we're like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? This doesn't feel like we thought it was going to feel. Like this doesn't, like something's missing. And so, the more work that I did helping people, the things, but they still don't feel joy for it. And that's really why we went into entrepreneurship in the first place. Like we wanted something that makes us feel lit up inside. So yeah, I think that sometimes we are just doing too much, and we're telling ourselves that we need to, and we don't.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. I think one of the things that I'm learning just around I don't know if I shared with you, Kasey, but I started another podcast called the Kindness and Compassion Podcast. And we'll have you on that as well, because I think you can, I think all of this kind of ties in. And one of the things that I'm hearing as a theme for a lot of folks is that with this, especially over the last 2 or 3 years with COVID and the political turmoil and the stuff that we're feeling in the Ukraine, and just all of those kinds of things going on, it just creates this internal angst, and we think that we have to do more in order to handle all of that. But the truth of the matter is that when we slow down enough and we get mindful about what's going on and really ground ourselves in what I like to call our why, as far as what are our internal systems telling us is amiss, that's when we can really begin to kind of heal and get to where we're intended to be.
Absolutely. I know for me, and I'm a little bit probably of an oddball in this situation, but I remember telling myself early on, whenever I started my business, that, I just needed to focus. I needed to focus on the goal and stay focused on hitting that $1 million, hitting that 2 million, hitting that 3, hitting that 5, growing the business, having an impact on the community, which are all great things. But what I was doing was checking out of my own systems, like not my external, but my internal systems. I was telling myself, like, don't feel that. Are you tired? You're fine. I was just really, really rigid with myself. And it got me a lot of places in business, and I'm thankful for that. But I could have still got there by staying in touch with all of the stuff going on in here. I just didn't know. I didn't know how. And I didn't have anyone talking about that. I didn't have anyone guiding me. I didn't have anyone, to influence in that way. And so I just thought, I just need to shut it out. I'm going to ignore everything going on out here and in here. And I'm just going to focus on the job, and I'm going to do more, and I'm going to more. And, but it's not sustainable. It's just like any kind of system that you're operating. If you're putting too much pressure and you don't have a strong enough internal sense of support, it's never going to last. And it's like a house of cards.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you ground yourself with those things that you figured out?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it's a process that I'm sharing in this framework. But the theme is really self-love.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really cliche and silly and not tangible and
Mm-hmm.
and not any of the things that are normal for me, but it's really just having that internal dialogue with what do I want? What is it that's going to serve me? One of the first steps that I'm talking about in this framework is we're so hard on ourselves as adults, and I think we lose touch of our inner child and who
Mm-hmm.
that little boy or girl or whatever was. And if we think about ourselves in that way and ask ourselves, what did that little girl need then? Chances are we still need that now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one thing, is just giving ourselves grace and giving ourselves the permission to slow down
Yes.
is one part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think one of the things for us that are in these professions as counselors and therapists and that sort of thing, it's stuff that we know and it's stuff that we work with our clients on, but it's sometimes difficult to apply to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a part of this too. A part of the framework is just revisiting our past and revisiting people and events that have shaped us in some form or fashion. And that was me. I worked with in clinical practice, I worked with panic and anxiety, panic disorders and anxiety. And I myself never really experienced anxiety because I knew how to control it. But I put up these blocks and these barriers. And of course, I wasn't experiencing anxiety because I wasn't feeling anything. I was focusing. And
mm-hmm.
so, being able to recognize that those got to come down, and how we can start to, as clinicians ourselves, start to bring those down. And it also applies to the same kind of work that we do with our clients. We just disregard ourselves in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
We're too busy trying to take care of everyone else.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we can slip into. And I recently was talking with Jane Carter, who you might know, Kasey, who's another consultant in Asheville, North Carolina. And we were talking about people pleasing. And one of the things that I think happens, as she pointed out, is that if we get too caught up in people pleasing, it's like anger turned inward. And if we do that too long, we can get to the place where we can begin to resent others. But at the same time, and it's a Southern thing, we want to be polite and put on the nice face and that sort of thing. But inwardly, we've got this kind of rage going on. Because we're trying to please everybody.
Yep, that's a big part of it, and I mean you would never maybe. And like I was at a retreat just a few weeks ago in New York, and I was with a bunch of New York people, and we each had scheduled times that we were to come in and do a one-on-one with this editor. And mine was at 10 o'clock. Well, there was someone else at 9:30 before me, and I'm sitting out in the hall, and it's like 10:02, and I'm not going in there because, it's, the other person hasn't come out yet, and that's rude. So I'm like waiting, and it's 10:05, and then it comes to 10:10. And then finally one that was helping run the event comes out, and she was like, you can come in. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, I didn't even think to come out here and get you, but then I remembered you're Southern, so you were not going to walk in there. And I was like, no, I wasn't, because that's rude. It's more just like paying attention to things like that.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. It's funny. It's my gut reaction is well, bless their hearts. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, I know it's great. Well, Kasey, what other kind of parting thoughts do you have just around this whole theme of being overwhelmed and being able to navigate all this stuff that we do as practice owners?
Well, if any of the listeners are feeling like they are just overwhelmed and tired and the job's never done, that's normal, because most people feel that way. And just to give you a little bit of hope or a little bit of peace of mind, it's not that it's always probably going to feel like that to a certain degree. It's just how triggered and how upset are you going to get about it. And most times it's not that we're just doing the wrong things, as I guess what I'm trying to say. If we learn, which is what I'm teaching in this book, is if you learn how to prioritize the needs of your business in a way that becomes automatic to you, you can so much easier just let the other things fall away, because you know that, yeah, it's important, but it's not going to make or break my business. And this is where I need to focus my attention. This is where I need to teach my team to focus their attention. And I can honestly say that once I did that, and once I've seen other people doing that, it is like this weight just comes off of your shoulders, and you sleep better and you feel better. You feel more confident about what you're doing. And so I guess it's just that you don't have to do everything. You just need to know the right things to do at the right time.
Right. It's really kind of the power of outsourcing to some degree, but also knowing what to outsource. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's being able to, I compare it a lot in the book to diagnosing your clients or patients. It's the same way. We have to be able to diagnose our business on the spot all the time, because those diagnoses are going to change, and we can't fix what we don't know exists.
Right. Oh, this is great stuff. And I know we're overdue for being able to hang out with each other and all of that sort of thing. And as close as we are, there's no excuse. I mean, really is. We're not. Yeah, we do. So, do you have a name for the new book yet, or is that not yet come to fruition?
I don't have a name. We're just calling it right now something a little generic. It's called In Search of Me. But that will change. Yeah. So we'll see what it comes up to be.
Folks, check out Fix This Next for Healthcare by Kasey Compton. It is anybody in private practice, and I would put it up there in the same category, which is out of that kind of the same mold anyway, as Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, which is how Kasey and I kind of got connected to begin with. Now that I think about the long story of it all. So, but check it out. And Kasey, tell folks where they can find you if they want to connect with you.
Yeah, if you want to connect with me and my team, just find us on social media or go to our website. It's just my name, KaseyCompton.com.
Awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes and show summary.
Awesome. Thank you, Gordon.
We'll see you here soon, hopefully, Kasey.
Okay.
Well, big thanks to Kasey for joining me again on this podcast, and I can't wait for her book to come out, her new book. And she shared a little bit of that with us, just gave us a tidbit there. But be sure and check out her other book that came out this past year, the first of this year. Can't remember exactly when it came out. Fix This Next for Healthcare. And do yourself a treat. And this is maybe listen to it on Audible. Get the hard copy, but also listen to it on Audible, because Kasey's way with words and her ability to tell stories is just, I could sit at her feet all day. So thanks, Kasey, for joining me on this. And if you'll go to KaseyCompton.com, you can find out more about Kasey's story and also get maybe a quick sneak peek of her upcoming book, In Search of Me, which I think is going to be phenomenal. So, and also be sure and Fix This Next for Healthcare. Again, I'm going to go back and listen to that again, because it's really gotten me thinking about the way I've got my practice structured and the things that we do need to get fixed within our practice. And I think it's an ongoing thing for most of us. So be sure and check that out. And also check out my new podcast, Kindness and Compassion. And you can get to that by going to kindnessandcompassion.com and find out more about that podcast. And, quick thought here, I need to get Kasey on that one. So, because she's got some great stories. The other thing is, be sure and check out our sponsors of the podcast, TherapyNotes, and you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes, and also Blueprint Health, and you can get to them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprint health. And if you go You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.